And I know everybody's been in this situation. You're on a burn or on a fire or doing some sort of activity, and then somebody inevitably comes up and just says, why are we doing it this way? And it's just like, I don't know. But at the AAR, you should probably speak up, and then they don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now you're never going to know. And maybe there was a reason for why we did it this way. And maybe it was a good one, maybe it was a bad one. It doesn't matter. But like, if we're not openly communicating with each other, we're never going to learn anything. And maybe you have a valid perspective that they're not paying attention to.
This is the Wildfire Lessons Podcast, where we promote learning by revealing the complexity and risk in the wildland fire service. We share the lessons. The learning that follows is up to you. Hello, this is Travis Dotson from the Wildland Fire Lessons Learn Center. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with a few folks who recently spent some time working at the Wildland Fire Lessons Learn Center. They came to us on detail assignments, and we are going to chat with them and get their perspective on what it's like being inside the machine, and they'll share with you some of the lessons they got from working at the Wildland Fire Lessons Learn Center. All right, let's jump into it.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Travis Dotson, and I'm the analyst at the Wildland Fire Lessons Learn Center. And we've got some new voices today, which I'm super excited about. And so let's jump in. Who do we have here today? Erin and Orlando. Who's up first?
I'll let Erin go first.
I'm going first. All right.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Hurley. I am the acting operations manager for the Lessons Learned Center, and I've been in this detail for almost 4 months now.
Sweet. So you are a guest at the Lessons Learned Center, and I guess that's all I'm trying to establish here is that we have people that are detailed to the Lessons Learned Center, and we get to talk to them. I'm super excited about it. All right, Orlando, tell us who you are.
Yeah, so Orlando Genao. I'm currently detailed in as the director for the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. I've been in it for the last 4 months.
Right on. And where are you all coming to us from?
I'm going to go first this time.
Okay,
oh,
you go
nice.
So I'm from South Florida. I work for Big Cypress National Preserve. Down there, I function as the Deputy Fire Management Officer for the Big Cypress side. And then just a little bit of context, we are part of a greater fire program. It's a South Florida Fire and Aviation program, which encompasses Big Cypress, where we have fire crews based out of. Then Everglades National Park, which we also have fire crews based out of. And then we have a slew of satellite parks in the South Florida and the Caribbean area that include Biscayne National Park, Dry Tortugas, Virgin Islands, and a couple spots as well down in the Caribbean in Puerto Rico.
Yes, I know that because I took a division soup assignment one time and ended up in the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. John. Did not know that existed until I took that resource order. Pretty wild. Right on. Erin?
So I guess Orlando went first because he has a lot more to talk about on all the different things with Southern Florida. I work out of Region 4 on the Payette National Forest in McCall, Idaho. I'm the admin operations specialist there. And I come to the Lessons Learned Center because prior to entering administration at the forest level, I was in fire, started my career in fire, and was in dispatch for many years. So both Region 6 and Region 4, and have done quite a few different jobs around the country.
Yeah. And I remember that, like when you were applying for this detail, that stood out as just like, oh my gosh, this person has this perspective and this perspective and this perspective. You know what I mean? Like it's super helpful and skills that come along with it, obviously too. So and just a plug to all of you people out there that are trying to make career decisions right now, man, like different perspectives and exposure to different things. Super looks good on a resume, I can tell you that.
I mean, that's the whole reason I did everything I did, Travis, just to build my resume.
Yeah, exactly. No, it has nothing to do with like life circumstances.
Not at all.
Yeah,
I was like, well, how can I get to the Lessons Learned Center in 2025? I think what I should do is leave the hotshot crew and go to dispatch.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. lofty goal, you know. You did it.
I did it.
Yeah.
Listen, going out with a bang.
Yeah, what are you going to do now? Jeez. But in terms of just learning, and I don't know, I stress that all the time. It's like, yeah, I know that, you know, you want to be a lifer on the crew, and it seems like the coolest thing ever right now. But trust me, there is a benefit, and we need lifers on the crew, right? Like that's a real thing too. But man, getting a lot of different exposure, and I think it's kind of the point behind the apprenticeship program, right? Like organizationally, they understand that. Like, yeah, you should go do some time at dispatch. You should go do some time. Anyway.
Well, and there's so much opportunity in the off season, right? Like,
Sure.
I mean, off season's not really what it used to be, but we're both here on detail right now. And so taking those opportunities to jump into a different role as opposed to just taking a temp promo as a squatty, you know, or doing something that you're in a familiar realm, jumping into something that's completely different, working for the WO, going to a different region, getting into administration. We had a smoke jumper a couple years ago who detailed behind me as the executive assistant to the forest supervisor, you know, and that opportunity for him to get into the forest leadership realm from the smoke jumper base was, I mean, instrumental to so many things that are going to move forward in his career. So highly recommend.
Yeah. And it comes in all different forms, but like you were saying about coming to the Lessons Learned Center in detail, that's also something that people wouldn't, it's not in the, I don't know, the list of
normal
things.
Trajectory
of
like all the different opportunities you can have outside of just going to dispatch or just taking an assignment in a different region, you know, working for Lessons Learned Center, going to DASP, like doing all these different things that our land management careers can offer us.
Yeah. So on that front, what was your view, this is for both of you, of the Lessons Learned Center prior to getting here, right? I mean, you had to know enough to apply. Well, maybe not. Maybe you were just like, I don't know, there's this some random detail that like, and they're looking for somebody. I guess they could put in for it. But yeah, if you can, you know, use the Wayback Machine to think about your perspective prior to working here, and what was your view or concept or whatever? What'd you think of the Lessons Learned Center?
Lessons Learned Center, in terms of what I knew, again, folks that I've worked with closely, Brior Casitas and I were on Wainima Hot Shots together. You know, like I have these like, I've touched the Lessons Learned Center through networking so many times, and I always think that if I have an opportunity to engage more directly with something that has been in my periphery, I always want to do that. So knowing what the Lessons Learned Center was and having a pretty good idea of what we do here, I needed to know more. And so I applied and now I'm here.
Orlando, what was your view of the Lessons Learned Center?
I think just like most operationally driven or focused people in the field, right? Like I knew what the Lessons Learned Center was. I knew the products that were being produced, and I knew the depository of information that they kept, right? Like I got the 2 Chains newsletter. I knew if I needed to go look up a report, I knew where to go and find that information. So I think I had the basic grasp and understanding of what the LLC was. What I didn't realize and what I didn't know until I got into the role was how much of an influence we have on the interagency community, not just from a federal perspective, but from some of the local, state, and cooperating agencies in tribal areas as well. But once I got a grasp of it, and then once I knew the key players, it opened my eyes to how important the LLC is to the community and how we integrate with the different agencies as well as the NWCG committees, and how we are able to influence and support change in what we do in the fire community. So for me, it was just like, I know the basics. 2 more chains, they hold a whole bunch of data. But then once I got into the position, I'm like, oh, okay.
So prior to showing up here, was there any specific products from the Lessons Learned Center that you used, or You know, like, had you heard a podcast before from us? I know you said you read Two More Chains.
Yeah. The podcast was brand, like, I didn't know that, that we as the LLC produced those, right? And so there's a couple other products that I was unaware about, but once I got into the organization, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, these are very useful things. Like data points is fantastic. Like that's something that I think a lot of people should start looking into and looking, even looking up old ones. I think it's important to kind of see what those things were at the time that we decided to do analysis associated with, like the end of year reports and like the incident review summaries. Like those are very fantastic documents that I think some people knew about, but I think the majority of the community didn't know about, right? And I think finding a way to publicize those resources and those products is super crucial to disseminating information amongst our community. The end result was just a little different, slightly different.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Erin, what about you? What was your, like, how granular was your exposure to like products? And really what I'm getting at is like what we work on and what our mission is. I think it shows up in a whole bunch of different ways, because a lot of people will say, yeah, I know what the Lessons Learned Center is. And a lot of times what they're saying is, I've heard those words before.
Or I recognize the blue stars.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even just from like Woofstar and, I mean, we've all, maybe not everyone listening to this podcast, but those of us who are pack tested and are, like we do our fire refresher every year. And that's where a lot of this information kind of triggers people to be like, oh yeah, I know what the Lessons Learned Center is, because a lot of that, like we went and pulled some reports, or this is what we're talking about. For me, I mean, not having been in operations for quite some time, my main experience was that my connection to fire management still was writing and editing for RLSs and FLAs and working with the risk management community. So that was really the product that I was most familiar with currently. I had a knowledge of the blog really back from like its inception days, just because of knowing people and networking, but not something that I visited on a daily basis.
Sure.
Just because it wasn't, that's not my relevant day job. I'm a huge proponent of cross training and folks that may be not primary fire or just militia, whatever, auxiliary, I think is what we're calling them now, auxiliary firefighters, that we still training and learning and all that stuff. That's often what gets missed. You get red carded and you go out as a read, or you get red carded and you're still doing, like a firefighter 2 assignment on a regulars crew, but you're missing all of that kind of background information of having the conversations on sometimes a daily basis, having the briefings on a crew, going and looking at these documents, or even going to NWCG courses. A lot of those things are missed with our folks that are not in a fire day job. And so for me, being able to step into this role from kind of an outside perspective, I realize how important it is to continue to perpetuate the knowledge of what Lessons Learned Center does to the entire fire land management community, for anyone who is touching wildland fire or even just associated with it. Agency administrators are not necessarily as in the know as to what Lessons Learned Center does, even though so much of our information and the products that we put within our canon of materials are relevant to them. And so I think that having that ability to network, and for Orlando and I to be in these positions where we can move outside of our Lessons Learned Center details and continue to kind of bring the message and pull people in, is so important. And I hope that as we move forward and once we're done with our details, that this is kind of something that we can continue to bring to the table and have people realize how important it is that we share our products with the entire community.
Yeah. And I think that it's fair to talk about how the Lessons Learned Center actually works, because that's a thing that I hear quite a bit, and that's partly why I wanted to get your perspective or your experience prior to showing up. But Erin, you said that a lot of your exposure was on the writing side of rapid lesson sharing or facilitated learning analysis, right? And we like that's usually an unintended outcome of some sort, usually negative. Usually somebody got hurt. That's why, not always. But then you're part of the team that comes in and writes that up, right? Interviews people, has group dialogue, and then writes the report that then comes to the Lessons Learned Center if it's fire related. And then we have the job of, posting it and advertising it and extracting lessons from it and comparing it and all that stuff. But that piece it's crucial for me to point out that part about you serving on the writing of the team for a couple different reasons. Number one, that's how this work gets done. A lot of people think, oh, you're the Lessons Learned Center. You have this giant staff of people that respond to all of these accidents, and your staff writes the report. And the reason I know that is because people say, hey, you guys got this wrong. Hey, well, we just hosted. That's a whole other, then it's like, go to the FLA class because, lots of different perspective involved in an event, right? But the way that stuff happens is something happens, somebody says, hey, let's do rapid lesson sharing or a FLA, and then a group of people get tapped from all kinds of different jobs and to come in and produce that report, and then it comes to us, so just laying that out there sometimes is helpful. We do that every so often just so there's some clarity there, and it helps when people are contacting us. It takes a while for us to walk through that, when they're either have an issue with something, or they're really frustrated by something, or they just really don't understand something, and they want to improve our process.
Well, I think that's a really good point as well, Travis. So when it comes to documents, we're much more of we're librarians, right? I mean, we obviously need to make sure that the content is digestible and that, it has the right format and so on and so forth, that it's actually a lesson, not just a statement. But we're not producing those things. So while they are a product, the Lessons Learned Center is not producing them, but there are products that we do produce.
Yes, absolutely.
Such as this podcast. And we also have the end of year report, blog posts, but that's where things get a little bit gray, because we can take material from other folks as well that are not just rapid lessons shared, that are not just a team of people writing about an incident. If you have a blog post or you have an idea for a podcast, the greater Wildland Fire community can bring those ideas and materials to the table. And I think that there's a little bit of confusion there where it's a black or white. Either we produce everything or we don't produce anything. But there's so much in between. And really, with only 5 people on the center staff, we rely on our community to bring information and ideas and concepts to the table that then we can help facilitate. And
it's actually a unique piece of something that could be very bureaucratic, right? Or it could be, what I mean? We know the answers. We will crunch the numbers. We will tell you, and here's the thing that you need to learn. That's why independent action, which is the clever term or label we have for. He's doing air quotes here, people. Exactly. Like there's a lot of air quotes happening. But that's what. When somebody contacts us and says, hey, I've got this thing and I've written about it and I want to share it with you, and then we publish them on our blog after we work with people, or we say no. Every so often we go, no, I'm not gonna put that one out there. But like we've had ones on different color hard hats. You know what I mean? Just it's like an opinion piece or an experience piece. We had one on summer camp, but that was one of my favorite. Clean yellow shirt. That was a really popular one. But it's this venue, right? And we've also had podcast episodes where somebody either contacts us or we contact somebody and go, man, you had this crazy experience. Would you be willing to come talk about it? And there's a venue, right? There's a lessons learned center where we're able to do that, and like you're saying, Erin, meet people where they're at, and then and share these stories because they're full of lessons. Whether somebody wrote it down, like we just got one recently. Hopefully, we'll be getting it out. And it's just somebody said, "Hey, man, this is something I've been thinking about." And they wrote it down and they sent it to us, and it's really a two-way street there, right? And so that there's a full spectrum there, and I really appreciate you pointing that out, Erin. That like, man, there's like user submitted stuff that's like super grassroots from the field, almost unvarnished, you know what I mean? And then there's the FLA kind of stuff where it's the reports that live in the database, which is pretty standardized, right? And we organize it and I'm always sensitive about whether or not we're librarians or not, because I know that librarians are a very special skill. You have to have a master's degree to be a librarian. Just because you work at a library does not make you a librarian. Right?
I mean, we don't decimalize anything here.
No. Yeah. But in terms of making certain types of information accessible, yes, we share that lane, and so there's that side of it, and then there's this mix, right, where we synthesize things and we create new stuff like Two More Chains or the annual incident review summary or the podcast. So yeah,
but that's the beauty of the whole thing, right? Like this whole community is based on perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And different vantage points and different viewpoints and opinions on how things should have went or how things went, and I think that's what makes what we do, not just in the LLC but overall across the fire community, important. Because like, if it's always the same people telling you this is how it should go, sure, you're never gonna learn anything. So you need that information coming from folks telling you like, hey, this thing happened and this is our story associated with it, right? And then you also need that spectrum of like, this is the official document of how things transpired. And, you know, back to your point, like, and to Erin's point, like, I, by no means did I expect the LLC to go out and facilitate a lot of these FLAs and all these reports. I didn't think that at all. I did think they had more involvement in going to certain key ones, but I don't think they went to all of them, because I've been part of FLAs before. And I know how they go. They bring in an FLA team, and they have folks come in who are hopefully bringing some good insight and some good perspective to help, you know, formulate this document, so then it could live forever and then we could always review it and kind of learn from it. But the like coming into this detail and realizing, oh, there's just 5 of us, like that was a very clear indication. Like, no, we can't do all of it. Like, there's no way. We depend on everybody who does this job, and whether you're a seasonal, whether you're a permanent, whether you have 2 years in, whether you have 25 years in, like, we need that melting pot of background and experience to help us develop the products that we have, so then we could share that for the future people coming into this business. And whether it's for the federal side or for the state side or the travel side, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So that is very clear. And there's a lot of reports that come in too, where, you know, we help facilitate some of those reports, right? Mm-hmm. Like, some people don't have the ability to do it all themselves, and then they ask us for input, or they ask us to use our editor to help, kind of like, yeah, Kate, can you have so-and-so look at this, make sure it looks good for us before we publish it. So I think that's what we're here for, right? Essentially, yeah. We're a support function.
Well, and I think you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about what did we think about Lessons Learned Center, why did we get here, and just that full fire perspective. I mean, you mentioned tribal, state, federal, but there's also volunteer fire departments, mm-hmm. rural communities that don't necessarily have things set up, but they're still experiencing lessons in the wildland fire community and aspect. And when we're getting all of this information brought to us, and it's somewhat biased, it doesn't actually speak to the whole community. And so something that's so important is getting everyone's perspectives and having people write their lessons, and then yes, we can help make that more digestible to everyone, but it's not our words, it's not our experience. And I think that is one of the biggest things that that I've gleaned from being here is that my career is on the federal side of things for the most part. And Orlando and I were speaking earlier today, just in a conference room, about, you know, our experience with working for different agencies or working for the state, and just variance of experience within who you work for, and then variance of experience, and this is specific to wildland fire, of initial attack versus extended attack and working in a dynamic environment. And it's the exact same thing when it comes to lessons and learning and having that culture within our wildland fire community. Is if we don't have that diversity of experience and diversity of voice, then we're working in a vacuum and we're only speaking to one group.
Sure. It's like if I'm going to go teach a refresher, you know, knowing your audience is a key thing, right? And if I'm going to go be talking to a group that is like mostly made up of engine crews, like I look through the incident review database about engine crew stuff, and if they happen to be state engine crews, I'll actually look for things that are, you know, from their organization or from their area, right? I try to tailor it a little bit, and it's great to have rapid lesson sharing, you know, stuff from that group. And it's the same thing if I go to a fire department, a structural fire department, I like to tell stories, you know, and share lessons from that group, right? But the only way it's going to get in is if those people are contributing, right? And that's part of what you're saying there, Erin. And again, to me, like, we're so lucky, you know, our culture is pretty amazing in that realm, because there is people contributing, there is people taking the time to share their stories, there is people taking the time to send us their writing, and that's very intentionally been grown throughout wildland fire service history, but then very specifically since 94, and we're seeing the fruits of it now. Like other groups, other workforces look at us and they're just like, man, how do you guys do that? Like, how is it that you're able to share those stories? In Orlando, when you were talking about, you know, if we only had one of them, right? If we only had that, the correct version, the final report, and this is how it's, and this is what you should be doing. It reminded me of, there's times when I've been like, maybe we're burning day after day after day, but whoever's doing the AARs isn't really good at it. And what they do is they just get up there and they go, okay, so, you know, what we did, and then they tell us what we did, and then they go and good job, right? And it's like, that was a terrible AAR,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just got up there and talked for a little bit,
Yeah.
You know, and that would be the equivalent in our world if we weren't taking input from the field, right?
But it goes both ways too, right? Like the person conducting it or facilitating it needs to be able to take that input, but the people who are implementing these actions need to be able to give the input.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know everybody's been in this situation. You're on a burn or on a fire or doing some sort of activity, and then somebody inevitably comes up and just says, why are we doing it this way? And it's just like, I don't know. But at the AAR, you should probably speak up, and then they don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now you're never going to know. And maybe there was a reason for why we did it this way. And maybe it was a good one, maybe it was a bad one. It doesn't matter. But like, if we're not openly communicating with each other, we're never going to learn anything. And maybe you have a valid perspective that they're not paying attention to. And that's why I think it's so important that what we do here is a collaboration, not with just the people in this room or the people in the national office, but with everybody in the community, because you're going to get different perspectives from all sides of the spectrum. And I think it's super important. And I think it's super crucial for people to speak up. Like, and by speak up, I mean, like, submit those lessons that you learned. Like, if you don't, like, if you have something that happened, people need to evaluate it from the perspective of like, is this beneficial for my organization? Is this beneficial for my region? Is this beneficial for the community as a whole? And if it is, you have to document it and then pass it on, because it's all about dissemination of information, right? Mm-hmm. That's the key.
And don't be scared by bureaucratic, like the actual format, or, well, I didn't have a team, or I can't write a whole page about this. That's what we're here to do.
I love that. Please don't write a full page.
Yeah, is help, hey, this thing happened. Here's a paragraph.
Yeah.
What can we do with this? And that is what we're here for. That's what we can say, oh, well, let's help you flesh this out. Or, wow, a paragraph is exactly what we need. Do you have a photo?
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and publish it, because this is something that people need to know that happened. You don't have to do a full-on analysis of it.
Yeah.
And we kind of, I'll just plug a product that we made this year that is not within our traditional products. And also, there are 6 of us, or have been 6 of us, because we keep forgetting about Matt.
No, yeah.
How can we forget about Matt? But we've had an intern, which is a phenomenal opportunity. We had a BLM hotshot intern, which helped out a ton, especially because he's getting a degree in writing. So he told us all what we were doing wrong. Thank you, Matt. But we made a flyer for non-federal, basically, was, how can we reach out to more people to say, this is what we do, this is how you can contribute, and here's some links, and here's our products, and here's tips on how to write a rapid lessons sharing document. And all of those things are on our website. But if you didn't know to go to the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned website, then you wouldn't know that was an opportunity, no matter how long you've been in wildland fire, or no matter how long you've been in the fire service in general, because this touches everyone who is engaged with any sort of fire service activities. So Matt was really instrumental in helping create that document, and then we were able to send it out to some of our contacts. So things like that of just garnering more knowledge to then support the mission.
Absolutely. All right, surprises. What was surprising? Orlando, you mentioned one earlier.
The staff level was super surprising.
Totally.
I didn't expect it to be like a full-on center, like 20 people, but I expected more than 6, as Erin corrected me.
Yeah.
I expected more than that, and then that was definitely a huge eye-opener from my perspective. It was like, oh man, there's not, just like everybody else in the federal service and other state agencies, like we just don't have enough people to do what the right thing is.
Sure. I think I only actually count as half a human. I'm pretty sure, but
depends on what level you're operating at on any given
exactly.
day. I think we're all there. So there's about
exactly.
2.5 of us in this room right now.
How about you, Erin? Surprises?
So a surprising thing to me, knowing this was an interagency operation and coming from interagency dispatch centers, is how little support we had to truly function as one unit with 2 different agencies. And a big portion of what Orlando and I've worked on is, just the getting it so that we have one landing place for our documents and being able to fund things. And I mean, the amount of what Lessons Learned Center has done without the true interagency support of how to function over the past, we'll say decade, because I don't know what it was like before that, but is amazing that anything has been accomplished, because being interagency is not an abstract concept. Like, this is how we operate. And yet we have a center that is really touching like every aspect of wildland fire across the board. We have DOI and USDA employees, and yet we can't get to the same documents, or we can't fund things because we didn't have an agreement or a purchase card in place. And so that was hugely surprising to me, and not in a negative way, just in like, oh my gosh, you've been doing, everything's been harder than it had to be. And so a lot of moving forward was like, let's make this more collaborative on agency sides, and the sharing of funding and resources and all of those things. We've put a lot of effort into that, and obviously everything changes. We have shifts in budgets and administration and fiscal year, goals and all that stuff. But hopefully moving forward, we can continue to push the Lessons Learned Center in a way that administratively functions, so that the few folks that are actually employed at the center, because again, staffing levels, don't have to spend all of their time on figuring out how to get their products out, how to engage with their coworkers, but can just actually focus on the mission.
Yeah, it's always funny, like for as long as I've been doing this, how like when you hear, oh, it's interagency, and you start to peel back the layers, you're like, oh, this is not, there's a lot of clunkiness associated with it. It's like, no, like he can't supervise that person because they're fish and they're park. So they, that the park guy over here needs to do is their EPAP. And it's always funny how that shakes out. And the same thing with the funding. The funding's like the biggest thing. Like, when we get wildfires, it's so easy to move money around. But when it comes to like operational budget and project dollars, it's like, no, we can't move this money over here because that's a different. And so it's always a challenge. But I think like you were saying, Erin, to your point, like you just got to get unique and creative and innovate new ways to try to be able to move that stuff around so it seems seamless, and to make things efficient and effective to help support an interagency program. Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm going to be getting emails that my DOI Teams account is expiring for probably the next year or so, and I haven't been able to log into it for the last 3 months. So
yeah, but I mean, again, we're kind of built for it, right? Like, I mean, you imagine going to a Type 3 incident or even bigger than that, and you show up. The team's already been there, for a little bit, and you show up, and you're just like, what? Like, how is it that you're making sure that the IAP gets out there? But because you come in after they've been doing problem solving and putting administrative spot fires out for the last 21 days or whatever, you know what I mean? And you're coming into a system that a broken system that they have made to work for because it's an emergency, and then you're just like, oh man, do I reinvent this, or do I just learn the existing system? You know what I mean? And the people that are in it, they're just like, oh yeah, I could tell you the whole lineage of why there's that many extension cords.
Yeah. We've been writing it on sticky notes for the last 20 days. This is just like, here's our box of Post-its, and you can follow it this way. Yeah.
Just trust me. Just, there's a reason, but just do it,
Yeah.
And then you got to decide, okay, well, am I going to just do it? Which, I can adapt and do that. Or am I going to take the time to, and I think anytime there's a pressing mission, that happens.
Totally.
Right. And I feel like that's part of that staffing conversation as that's the way I feel like at the Lessons Learned Center when I'm trying to make a decision about, spending the time to make an administrative system work or get the lesson out. I'm always going to choose to get the lesson out. You know what I mean? And so maybe that comes across as me trying to defend our broken system, but that's okay because I think people can relate, and I think it illustrates what we will ultimately prioritize. You know what I mean? And getting the lesson out or whatever that a version of that is what we're going to focus on. So speaking of the mission, given the Lessons Learned Center mission and your unique view of, pre and post, right? You kind of have this idea of what the Lessons Learned Center does. And now you have the inside view of it. What are some, I don't know, thoughts or takeaways about the system as a whole, right? Like about lessons, how does that work or not work? You know what I mean? Because you have this unique perspective, right? As like what you were thinking, and then what you saw, and now as you like transition out of it, going back into more of a user.
So for me, I think, and it's not so much in the products. I think the products are great, and it's always, in the end of the day, we could always do more. I think as me transitioning out, I think the biggest thing that changed my perspective has changed is like there's so much more that we could do to influence at the interagency level with participation in committees or being at the table on some key conversations. And not to say that we're there to say we're the Lessons Learned Center, and this is what we say is the right thing. That's not it at all. It's for us to be there as an advisor, to be there as a resource that people could tap into, to be there as if there's a conversation about, we sent it out the other day, soft stretchers. If there's a lot of stuff associated with soft stretchers and whether it should be a requirement or should not be a requirement, should it be part of the standard kit, and so forth and so forth, we should be that resource that folks will look, the leadership in the organizations will look over to us and be like, hey, can you guys dig into this a little bit and provide us some information, so that we, as the deciding organization, can make a sound decision, right? Like, and I think we do that already, but we don't do it to the level that I think we should do it. And so me coming into this organization, I thought we had more influence, and then me leaving the organization, I realized we had an influence, but not to the level that I expected it to be.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, my first thought was that networking. And again, like just having the name recognition and having the voice in the room, or even just the ear in the room, to be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing when I went to this committee. And while I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I just, maybe we need to think about what that looks like, 1, 2, 3 months down the road, and what sort of products we're getting in lessons that we are facilitating the dissemination of, because these people are already talking about it or they have no idea. And so as I exit this role, and I've already had so many conversations with a lot of my friends that are still in operations of, why are we not having these conversations? What are we doing with the products that we are putting out from the Lessons Learned Center? What are you doing besides just teaching RT-130 with it? Are you actually pulling up the same document every year? Like, I am very familiar with Little Venus. That was probably every discussion I had for at least 3 years when I was still in operations. And so why are we not branching out as the group that is, as the users of our products, and just like, what things are we, the Lessons Learned Center, missing that the field is not providing us? And so it's that networking thing, and that's a passion of mine anyway, but I think it's very difficult with a small staff and an interagency small staff to make sure that we are in those conversations, and we depend so much on the workforce to let us know what's going on. So again, we've said it a few times before, but like, give us your ideas, give us your products, write some things up, send us a paragraph, shoot us a Teams message. And that's kind of, as I move away from my role within the Lessons Learned Center, is just to continue those conversations with the greater community. We
have a saying, right? It's be the Lessons Learned Center wherever you are.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because that's actually, it's that human element, and you're going to be able to have some of those conversations, and that's where you hear the stories. You know what I mean? That's where you hear people going like, hey, I had this crazy thing happen. Oh, awesome. You should come tell us, and people have these lessons. Or sometimes we hear somebody go, hey, we saw this rapid lesson sharing, and then we took that lesson and we applied it. We went and did that. That's when we have a party. We're just like, somebody used the Lessons Learned and they implemented a lesson. They're like, oh yeah, we pulled the skid plate off the bottom of our UTV and it was a rat's nest of stuff under there and we got it all cleaned out. And like, oh man, we have a party. Because we get so excited about like it landing, right? Partly because that's our business, is we're collecting the lessons and putting them out there. And we never, it's one of those things where you don't always hear the feedback of you know what I mean, did it work? And
also when you are submitting lessons or just talking about an incident that happened, it doesn't necessarily have to be a crazy thing, right? It could be something that we were fully aware of being a risk, and then you say, well, Eric, you knew that could happen, and then Eric says, yeah, man, and it did. Mm-hmm. and that's just as important sometimes, because as the analyst, like you're collecting data, you're saying, and by you, with my hands, I'm pointing at Travis. So Travis is the analyst, and so he's collecting data, and even if it's not a full write-up, a full crazy story about a thing that happened, it's just like, hey, we knew this was a risk, and it came to fruition.
Yeah.
Period. End of sentence.
That's the count sometimes
Right.
is the thing. So, yeah. And lessons are not always, they don't always have to do with, accidents or bad outcomes or something like that. Like, still one of my favorite lessons of all times was the person that figured out that you could roll hose with a drill, you know what I mean? And you put a forked bit in there and just put it next to the coupling and stretch it out. And he sent us a rapid lesson sharing, and he's like, hey, look, this is how we rolled hose, and it's so obvious once you see it, and you're just like, oh man, that's awesome. And that's like such a useful lesson, you know what I mean? Nobody got hurt, nobody, it's just efficiency in practice, right?
It's like a life hack.
Totally. It's like
We
a
love life hacks.
wildfire life hack, and we put out a one pager that basically just has some pictures on it, and I remember it says no hose roller, no problem, and it's just like super simple. And sometimes that's the best thing. Maybe that just shows how nerdy I am. But
it also is a bit of levity, and it humanizes a lot of the products that sometimes people associate the Lessons Learned Center with the serious incidents.
Sure.
Oh, well, why would I go there? I don't want to read about fatalities. Why would I go there? I don't want to read about XYZ. But really, it doesn't have to be catastrophic for it to be something that's important to share. And so it's a good reminder that it doesn't have to be Storm King to make it to our website.
Yeah. And I it's like AARs, right? I always go back to that because it's like some of the best AARs is just something super simple. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we should label which jerry cans have saw mix and which ones have, drip mix. Those are different. Like, yeah, that's probably pretty good idea. Sometimes it can be pretty simple.
Oh, we love label makers.
But yeah, right on. What's your advice, given your perspective now, for people in the field in terms of leveraging the Lessons Learned Center or contributing to it? I don't know. Maybe we've already kind of covered that ground. Do you have anything specific?
I would just say use it, man. I'll say the same thing I tell to my guys at work every day. Like, if you got something to say it, but say it in a constructive manner that's tactful and is meaningful and has purpose, right? But if we're not communicating, we're never going to get that information across. Because it goes back to what you were saying, Travis, something as simple as, oh, this is how we roll hose with the drill. Like, those are things that we as organizations, not at whatever level it is and for whatever agency you're at, is stuff that you set up as standards. Like, we have standards where I work at, and then when we start to deviate from it because we're not talking about it, that's when things go sideways on us. And like, the best is when people like, hey, we're deviating. It's like, well, say something. Like, I'm not there. Say that we're straying from the path. And then it's like, okay. So and that's the same thing with the Lessons Learned Center. Like, there's a whole bunch of unspoken things that happen in our operations, or even in the planning of our operations, that we are not disseminating out, and we should be.
Sure.
And so for me, it's like, use it and contribute and participate.
Yeah.
That's my biggest, message to everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Participate.
Wow. Every so often, like, I think, I don't know how often it is. Maybe every couple of years or something like that, we get a rapid lesson sharing about a engine bin being ripped off as the engine drives out of the bay, right? And we all know that, like, that happens, right? Mm-hmm. And but somebody takes the time to send a picture and a real simple write up, and I know there's always like people laughing about it, and but usually what it does is it serves as a reminder, right? Because the other group, they were getting just as lax. But they see that, and it just immediately, just the image, they're going like, oh, I know that's a real risk, right? Yeah. And so they're just like, hey, why don't let's get back in the practice of that 360 or that golden circle, you know what I mean? And it's so beneficial, and it seems like such a minor thing, like, oh my gosh, haven't we already learned that lesson? Hasn't that already been submitted? But
why does it continue to happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also we have turnover. in our workforce, and we've talked about institutional knowledge and how things have gone and where the Lessons Learned Center comes from and the things that we talk about a lot. But as we get new people, as we change agencies, as we change how we do things, just whether it be because of bureaucracy or learning, we have to remind ourselves. And it's not, we've talked about how, we disseminate the products, but a lot of the products are not things that we make ourselves. So it's not on Travis Dotson to say, oh, it's been 3.5 years. We better talk about backing, because that doesn't hit. That is like, oh, thanks, Travis. Thanks for reminding us. Like, do you have a backer every time you reverse? But
we should do a whole podcast episode on backing signals. It'll be great.
I think we should do a whole podcast episode on anecdotes of backing, because we could just have people call in all the bad things that they've backed into.
Oh yeah,
I think
we'll start with mailboxes. But
friends.
Bad supervisors.
It happens.
But it doesn't hit, it's like it doesn't have the gravity, even if it's not a grave situation, the gravity of the lesson is not the same if it comes from Lessons Learned Center staff as a reminder as it would coming from the field of, hey, it happened again, and putting it out there. So it's, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be grave. It could actually be something funny that it's like, hey, just a reminder, don't do this because this is a thing. Or do this.
Yeah,
do this because this may happen if you don't. And it just, it's that human side.
And we have a venue for it. Not every organization has a mechanism. There's already a mechanism. And I point this out every so often. It's like, we were so far ahead of the curve when the pandemic happened, because all of a sudden people had these lessons, right? They were just like, and remember this, we didn't know a lot of things, and it was like, geez, how are we going to do ICP when we're doing spacing, and you know what I mean? And it was also, people didn't know what's the proper term for paying on your phone, you know what I mean, through an app. I want to use the product name, but you know what I mean? Like, that wasn't as in common use.
Right.
And I remember
tap to pay.
Yeah, exactly. And we were getting rapid lesson sharing. I was like, hey, there's this way to pay for food at the restaurant where you don't actually give each other money. Yeah. You know what I mean? And people were like, oh, wow. But anyway, our system was ahead of the curve because we didn't have to invent a way to share lessons. Right. People could just be like, hey, I'm learning this thing about this COVID, this pandemic, you know what I mean?
More air quotes. People.
Yeah, exactly. These things that words that we didn't know prior to, and situations that we didn't know, but we already had a mechanism, right? And people just had to use the existing mechanism to share these lessons across a wide group of people. And it's like, every so often we're going to, like, we're maintaining the system, and then every so often we're going to have this time where it's like, oh man, I'm glad we had rapid lesson sharing.
Yes. Well, anecdotally, in the little bit of a tangent, is there was a pandemic plan in place for swine flu years before COVID, and it took quite some time. I mean, I know I shared it with more upper echelon folks. I was like, well, did you know about this? Like, I found this on this thing. And so, again, not having like a repository for information meant that there wasn't a place for leadership to immediately go to. And folks that had lived through it knew about it, or folks that knew where to look knew about it. But Lessons Learned Center has a place where we keep information on things that are relevant to the community, and that is paramount to the success of being a learning culture and having the conversations
and being efficient.
Well, yes, we are nothing if not efficient.
Yeah. All right. Do you have either of you have favorite lessons?
I thought you were gonna ask for like closing statements.
I could do that too. Or just tell us a funny story.
Favorite lessons.
The lessons that I appreciate the most are the ones that are associated with my geographical area.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is this, like, there's this strong feeling that fire is the West.
Yeah.
But there's also fire east of the Mississippi. And so anytime there's any lessons associated with anything in the South, particularly, South Florida or Florida as a whole, I gravitate towards those because there's a lot of commonality associated with strategy and tactics, a lot of commonality with the fuel types. And like the one that I use on a regular basis because it is in the same area that like probably within like 10 miles as a crow flies from where I work is the Golden Gate Estates. I use that at least every 5 years in a refresher because a lot of the management decisions that were made and a lot of the actions that we're taking that resulted in that fatality are the same ones that we still do today. And it's the conditions, like I'm probably going to go back to work here in a week or so and we will be in fire season.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened, like super early fire season in that scenario, and we actually use it as material for our fire refresher. So me being extremely biased, anything that pertains to the area that I'm working at currently is what I usually gravitate towards.
I think that's true of everybody, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you were talking about that earlier of when you're doing RT-130s, you look at whether it be the same agency or the same location. And you saying that, I mean, I put it as my staff pick for the end of year report. But so the Crazy Creek fire on the Ochoco National Forest, which I worked on for quite some time, and having the crew member get run over in camp while they were sleeping. And it's like so many of those things hit for my personal experience, whether it be geographic location, sleeping in a field, like getting into camp late, not knowing where you're supposed to sleep. And I think so many of us have had similar experiences, but when everything aligns and it speaks to you in that way, like those are the lessons you remember. And so having a broader perspective, again, like that's how we get information to people, is because it actually.
Thank you for confirming the existence of the likelihood of learning. Please go back and reference a previous podcast where we talk all about the model called the likelihood of learning. You guys just described it right there of just like, yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I do backward high fives.
Because of COVID?
Yeah, no, not the COVID. It's just like the weird angle. Yeah.
We're trying to high five right now and
didn't
really
work out,
unsuccessful.
Right? We'll have to cut that part out. No, just kidding. But the likelihood of learning is just part of it is, when you have some sort of tie to it, you know what I mean? It's just you pay attention a little bit differently, you know what I mean? And you relate a little bit differently, and we can have ties to it in all kinds of different ways. Maybe we knew somebody, maybe you see the picture and you go, that engine setup is exactly the same as my engine setup. Like, we keep the hose in the same place, right? And that's the thing that ties you to. Oh, I used to work on that forest. I used to, whatever those ties are, is what makes us tune in and be a little bit more receptive to the lesson.
Well, it's the concept of adult learning. Like, why is this important to me?
Yeah. And so that just reinforces that, like, man, let's have all kinds of different kinds, because you never know what's gonna land with people.
You know what the real issue was with the high five? I was just being lazy and I didn't want to turn my hand.
You guys should do an RLS.
Yeah, we should.
You should. High five.
We hit knuckles and it got weird.
Yeah, it's like, I'm telling you, man.
It's like the worst fist bump ever.
We'll get a picture. We'll reenact it.
I take full blame of that. But I will say this, Travis, to your point, like, yes, we all gravitate to sort of the stuff that relates to us, right? But I do advocate for people to start reaching out and looking at different things, because even though different geographic area, different fuel types, different strategies, tactics, whatever, the common thing that's always going to be the same is the human factors that impact the decisions, right, or impact the outcome. They're the same human factors across the board, whether you're in Australia or whether you're in Canada. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the decisions, the stressors, all the inputs, like, they're the same. So it is important for people to go in and dive outside of their comfort zone and start looking at different things, because there might be something that you don't know about that you can either implement or not implement or learn from for next time.
But there's even we have our search tool in the IRDB that you could just search by incident type because you're interested in tractor plow, whatever, because you work in Southern Florida, and then you find out that, oh, here's a bunch of things that I would have never known about because it wasn't my geographical area. I think we really have to hone that ADHD perspective of I'm going to fall down this rabbit hole. I open the database and now I'm gone.
Yeah.
So
I remember
use that time
absolutely
to learn all the things.
I taught a class, and part of it was okay, go to the incident review database. You break up into groups, the most basic teaching mechanism ever is just okay, you're going to break up into groups, right? And then go to the incident review database and then get one and then teach the group about what you learned. And I remember one of them, people said, oh, we selected this one because I just didn't expect to see insects and animals listed as a thing, and I opened it up and I was like, geez, how often do we have interactions with these, insects and animals on fires? And it was a bee sting that went bad and all the, you know what I mean? But they made it really interesting. And it's just I never would have guessed that somebody, given that assignment's going to be well, let me go look at RLS about, bee stings. But there's some pretty gnarly things in there. Plus, we do have the one in that category where the helicopter was flying and there was a snake in the helicopter. You know what I mean?
That is one of my favorites, I would say. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Snake in a helicopter.
Snakes on a plane.
Yeah, totally. It was a pretty good time when that one came in. We were just
and that's, that's the thing. If anything, when you're submitting lessons to the Lessons Learned Center, think about how it'll make our day.
That's right.
If it's something like that, because we're important too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You should definitely err on the side of sending it in.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll tell you no thanks if we don't want it. Right on. Well, that's all the questions we had. Erin, do you have any closing remarks?
Oh no.
Yeah, no. I'm just kidding.
I miss you already.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's super good to have everything that we just talked about, multiple perspectives, and then the opportunity. I don't know. Would you guys? Would you recommend it to other people? Doing a stint at the Lessons Learned Center?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
you were shaking your head like you were going to say no.
Yeah, you were like,
no.
Yes.
Well, I think in my mind I was thinking it takes a certain personality that's willing to step pretty far outside of their comfort zone, and I think that anyone could benefit from it. But if you're truly going to get the full perspective, you need to be willing to know that you don't know. And
I didn't know how you were going to finish that sentence. I thought you were going to say it takes a certain type of person to work with Travis.
Yeah. Artist hat.
Yeah.
Hotshot hat, smoke jumper tattoo. You don't know who you're going to get.
That's right.
And he's virtual. So it's really,
I'm not real.
Yeah.
I'm not real. Just
half a person.
No,
absolutely. I think, as I said at the beginning, any opportunity to do something outside of your day job, and especially when you really step outside of your traditional role, it's a good resume builder, and really when it comes down to it, a resume builder just makes you a more complete human, and those are the people you want to work with, are the folks that challenge you. So absolutely.
100%. I think in any scenario, I think getting out of your comfort zone and doing something different, especially something different outside of your normal realm, is a great position to be in, because it changes your vantage point, right? It changes how you view everything. Like looking at the landscape when the toe of the slope looks different than when you're sitting on the ridge. Mm-hmm. And so I would 100% endorse anybody to come in and do a stint for sure.
Right on. All right. I think that's it. Thanks a bunch for taking the time and for all the work that you all did at the Lessons Learned Center. We will forever be grateful.
Thanks for putting up with us, Travis.
Every day.
Every day. Except for Saturdays and Sundays.
And holidays.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. There it is. Great insights from both Erin and Orlando on some of the inner workings and their perspective on their time at the Lessons Learned Center, and really shine some light on how dependent we are on you all out there in the field that are having the experiences and going through everything that we go through out there and learning the lessons yourselves and then sharing them with us. And once they're to us, we have work to do on packaging them and looking at trends and that kind of stuff. But man, it's really dependent on this spirit that we have in our community of sharing our experiences. So huge thank you to both Erin and Orlando for stepping up and taking these details, coming in, and all the work they did during their time at the Lessons Learned Center, and then taking the time to share their experiences and their lessons with all of you, all in the spirit of learning, which is what we're all about. All right, folks, take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to the Wildfire Lessons Podcast. Don't forget to head on over to lessons.wildfire.gov to get all the latest information from the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. You can subscribe to our email list and follow us on social media. Music is provided by second-generation smoke jumper Steve Baker, who always likes to keep one foot in the black. Thanks, Steve. Remember, we honor through learning.